Welcome to the Line Movement MMA betting show. I'm Daniel Levy from Best Fight Picks and Half the Battle, joined now by Dan Tom from the Protect Your Neck podcast and MMA Junkie. Today we're going to be talking about UFC Fight Island 5 because we got a showdown in the bantamweight division between Marlon Moraes and Corey Sandhagen. It's going to be one hell of a matchup, but real quick, got to let our Canadian listeners know to go to blitzbet.eu. And Dan Tom, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. This main event's got me sizzling. It's got me up. You know, you question the older fighters if they're going to get up for a fight, right, Dan? We question that ourselves. Well, as an older one myself, I guess I'll say I'm up for this fight as far as breaking it down goes.
Dan Tom, this fight's got me so pumped up because we got the power of Magic Marlon Moraes versus the volume and output of Corey the Sandman Sandhagen. And I really think that that's the story of the fight. Now, I do think there might be a couple misleading narratives, and we're going to get to that. But real quick, I mean, just as a, outline of the fight, do you agree that it's volume versus power?
I think that volume versus power is certainly a big staple, but I think pace and some other things, hopefully we can talk about, will come into play. It's not that other things don't come into play. I just feel like so many things not are just potent on each side, but they kind of cancel each other out. Like I'm sure we'll talk about the body work and the leg work of each man, how that's a deceptive two-way street there. So a lot of things kind of cancel out. So for me, I don't know if it's a power versus a volume, but I do see pace being a big key if we can get past the power.
Yeah, so, and I'm pretty sure if I had to take a wild guess, he's referring to the pace of Sandhagen overcoming the power of Magic Marlon Moraes. And this is such an interesting fight for a lot of reasons because, I mean, it's easy to sit here and say that, oh, if Marlon Moraes doesn't get a first-round knockout, then Corey Sandhagen is going to take over the fight. But you have to be a certain level of fighter to go out there and beat a guy like Magic Marlon Moraes. I mean, the only guy to truly defeat him inside the octagon is Henry Cejudo. I mean, I know there was the Rothwell fight, which, a lot of people thought was controversial, but bottom line, they ran it back. Marlon stopped him in the first round, so he avenged that loss. But the only true loss was the Henry Cejudo one. And Henry Cejudo had to dig down, had to dig deep and go to a place where I'm not sure that Corey Sandhagen's willing to go. And that's not because I don't think Corey Sandhagen is as tough as they come. It's just because when you talk about a guy like Henry Cejudo, you're talking about a once-in-a-lifetime athlete. I mean, Olympic gold medalist, UFC flyweight champion, UFC bantamweight champion. He truly is a unique and special athlete. And he had to go through hell to take that fight from Marlon Moraes. So it's very, very intriguing for a lot of reasons, Dan Tom.
It is, man. It is. And the Cejudo sample size is an interesting one, right? Because it's such a beautiful adjustment. It's such a beautiful fight. Take nothing away and give credit to, I believe the name was Tony DeFranco in Cejudo's corner, a guy who doesn't get enough credit as well with the Eric Albaicin when we're talking about the coaches. But as far as the fighters go, what does Henry Cejudo do? He only, still looks great after that and kind of, retires, I use air quotes in MMA, on top. Whereas Moraes, again, it gets really deceptive. There's a lot of different opinions. Speaking of the Assunção fight, I'm a big fan of Assunção. That being said, I totally get what you're saying there, Dan. It's not a robbery. It was a close fight. But yes, I am someone who thought it probably should have gone the other way. But yeah, I agree with you there. It's just weird, right? When we're trying to measure the pace. When my older breakdowns, I used to think that, like compared to Jimmy Rivera, for example, Marlon Moraes was better built to go 5 rounds than certain guys. And he's proven me wrong, recently, because you could argue in the Jose Aldo fight, even if you argue that he won the fight and that you agree with the scorecards, like I do, I agree with it. I'm not crying robbery or anything there. But like you can't argue that he was trying to measure his pace. He did a better job of measuring the pace, but you could almost see that it was a real note, and it should be. He was just coming off of a loss where he lost arguably because of pacing. But he let that fight be, too close for comfort, in my opinion, betting lines or anything like that aside. So are we overblowing the pace issue, or where do you think the pacing's at, Dan?
I mean, this is what I got to say about the pace, my man, because look, as far as that Jose Aldo fight is concerned, and I mean, I will bring betting lines into this. I mean, he was slight chalk in that spot, but look, I agree with the decision. I thought he won the first round, and I thought he won the third round. And you want to take it a step further, you definitely give that second round to Jose Aldo. But guess who Jose Aldo also won the second round against? Peter Yan. So, I mean, Jose Aldo, just because he might be at the end of his career doesn't mean that he's not still a dangerous guy. I mean, it's still Jose Aldo. You know, just because he's not going to touch gold again doesn't mean that he's not a tough out. So the fact that, you know, like I just said, that he was able to win the second round, not only against Marlon, but against Peter Yan, the current champion too. I mean, I think we got to give Jose Aldo a little bit of credit, and we got to give Marlon credit too, because he bit down in that third round. When everyone said, oh, this guy can't win a fight past the first round, he bit down when it was 1-1 going in that third round, and he edged out that third round. Now, as far as Corey Sandhagen, this is where it gets interesting, Dan Tom, because how many times have we truly seen him in the third round in the UFC? We've seen him in there with John Lineker, and honestly, that third round was the sketchiest round of the entire fight, Dan Tom. And also, you know, the Asuncao fight. Now, while I think that Corey Sandhagen put a clinic on Asuncao, the third round was the only round where Asuncao had his moments. So everyone's saying that if this goes 5 rounds, it automatically favors Sandhagen. I'm not entirely sure I agree, Dan Tom, because historically speaking, like, Sandhagen pushes such a heavy pace that even though he trains in that Denver elevation, he's got to eat some real shots to be able to maintain this in the championship rounds. And interestingly enough, it's actually Marlon Moraes that's been 5 rounds twice in his career. Corey Sandhagen doesn't know what championship rounds are like at this point.
Yeah, no, those are some great points. And I think anybody who's, you know, picking Sandhagen here, or at least for that narrative, think that there's some water to it, regardless if you're picking Sandhagen. I think it's because he does train at elevation. You look at his style, even though he is big. I've talked to them about this when I've interviewed him. He's a guy who really doesn't cut a lot of weight. And you can kind of tell so, you know, in that stint that he had where he moonlighted 45 on the way into the UFC. So I don't think there's too big of flags there. I do like your assessment with the Jose Aldo fight. And I agree, Dan. I'd warn anybody, you know, writing that off because it's Jose Aldo. In fact, I'm more on your side on that sense, where I think that victory is aged even better for Marlon Moraes when you look at what Jose Aldo did against Peter Yan. But I'm just talking about strictly when I bring up that fight. I guess I'm talking about strictly from a pace perspective. And not only that, you said bit down. He did bite down. Those were correct words. But that's also what worries me, right? It's like, what were the 2 things you just got burned from? Was pace and being too comfortable with letting Cejudo hit him, right? And what does he do? He's comfortable with Jose Aldo, of all guys, a guy moving down, not moving up. You know, he still have all that power for all we know. And he was comfortable with getting hit. And I actually put that in my notes when going through, because I went through all of Marlon Moraes' catalog that was available online. And that was just something that stood out to me. I wrote that he could be too confident in his chin. So if both guys, by the numbers and by my eyesight, by their stylistic sensibilities, they both can do damage to the legs and to the body, it should be looked out for here, but they both take a lot of that traffic. What separates them is up at the head level. They're both deceptively hard to hit on the head, but Moraes much, much more comfortable being hit in the head. I don't like that. I feel like you get hit in the head with a soft, you know, a softer fisted guy. And I'd say that in the compliment. Let me round the corner here against a Corey Sandhagen. I argue it's a bit dangerous than getting hit with the powerful guy. The powerful guy, like Aldo, you're going to know early or not if you're going to be able to take the power. Obviously, Moraes felt like he could take the power. Probably shouldn't have. It didn't cost him. You know, again, that's my criticism of him fighting probably a little closer than he needed to. But he opted to take that power, and against a guy who maybe he's not going to put that power, but he's going to build and build. It almost becomes dangerous because next thing you know, the water, it started off just like a little bit of driplet, you know, a little bit of a water droplets as a leak, Dan. But next thing you know, by round 3 or round 4, you know, you're swimming up to it. So it could be one of those dangerous things. That's why this fight kind of reminds me of Jose Aldo's first meeting with Max Holloway. So for that reason, just like with that fight, I'm going to take Sandhagen. Perhaps playing into this theory that we're talking about, Dan, based off the volume, I'm just not sold on what that cardio is going to look like in the later rounds, especially if he's able to rock Sandhagen early, like I think he is. I think that could be almost really bad for Moraes if he's not able to get him out of there, because then he expels a bunch of energy.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that that's a great point you bring up because the accumulation, I think it can actually be a factor for both fighters. I think for Corey Sandhagen, start off kind of light and then eventually pepper him to a point where the guy, you remember that famous Conor McGregor quote where when you butcher a man's body to the point where he can no longer hold his hands up, you know what I'm saying, man? So
Yeah.
if Corey Sandhagen comes out here, starts popping the jab, it's just that he's going to have to survive some serious, serious shots. And he's done it in the past. Look, the Yuri Alcantara fight, he got his nose smashed. And luckily for him, he's double jointed because that armbar looked pretty damn deep. And then also the John Lineker fight. Now, I personally feel like if that John Lineker fight was 5 rounds, he would have eventually succumbed to the power because it looked to me, no disrespect, like he was barely hanging on by that 3rd round. It seemed like those shots, we're talking about accumulation, the power was starting to accumulate. But the reason he won, again, accumulation, the volume accumulated. So it's one of those things where I'm curious to see how he reacts to these calf kicks and can he eat one of these head kicks? Because Corey Sandhagen's a very tough guy. And, oftentimes he's going to eat your best shot and then just keep coming forward and, kind of paint a little masterpiece out there and style on guys. It's just that, is he truly a top 5 guy right now? And the reason I'm bringing that up, Dan Tom, is because, again, like I said earlier, you have to be a certain level to beat a guy like Marlon Moraes. Not just any guy with good volume is going to come out here and beat him. Only the elite of the elite are going to beat a guy like Marlon Moraes. And people are saying Corey Sandhagen's a future world champion. Now, I personally disagree. I feel like that Aljamain Sterling fight, and that's not to discredit Aljamain Sterling's performance, not one bit, but even though that scenario is probably not going to happen here, that was kind of alarming, man, to get stopped in 90 seconds like that, only land 1 strike the entire fight. And that, again, that's not to take away from the great, amazing ground game that Aljamain Sterling has, but I kind of expected more from Sandhagen in that spot. And at least in these fights that Marlon Moraes is losing, he's dragging these guys through hell. I mean, like I said, Henry Cejudo had to dig deep to a place where not a lot of people are willing to go. And I know Henry is because of the kind of caliber athlete he is, but I still need proof that Sandhagen's willing to go there. So listen, I can sit here and make the argument for Corey Sandhagen too, and I think you brought up I think you made a great point for Sandhagen. I can't debate any of the points you brought up, but I'm going to go on the opposite side, and I'm going to say that Marlon Moraes chops down the taller man with the calf kicks, eventually forces him to switch stances, then he's going to be wobbling around on one leg, and eventually that high kick is going to find its home, and it's going to knock him out. So I'm going to go with Marlon Moraes via 1st-round knockout.
I like that you said high kick because for people thinking that the advantage, the reach advantage, and the height are going to be the difference, that's not why I'm picking Sandhagen. I think you'd agree with me, Dan, that I think speed is going to be a bigger factor. I know that Moraes hasn't faced a tall guy recently. We got to go all the way back to Miguel Torres to hit 5'9". Other than that, we're looking at guys like Tyson Nam, and those are all still in the WSOF. Point being, he is just as capable and willing to throw head kicks. Where Marlon Moraes has been stung, it's because of guys who can throw straight shot counters, which Sandhagen can throw, and uppercuts, which Sandhagen can throw. But mainly it was speed. So I think speed is going to actually be more of a factor for these two than anyone banking that Sandhagen's going to be insulated from his height or his reach. It's not going to be that case with the type of striker Marlon Moraes is. So I don't blame you for picking him. My opinion of this fight, Dan, moves similar with the line movement. I came in leaning toward Moraes. I thought this was a bad matchup for Sandhagen. The more I looked at it for the reasons I already stated, I ended up leaning towards Sandhagen. Unfortunately, the line moved with me. I thought I'd be coming in here with some contrarian dog play, but I'm not, man, which worries me, Dan, because the value is on your side of the pick. So I don't hate anybody that's picking Marlon Moraes. I just do think that it's KO or bust. Marlon Moraes has only had 3 submissions in the past decade. All 3 of those came from knockdowns, not takedowns. I don't think he pursues the wrestling heavy game plan. I will be looking for boxing improvements. You want to speak about Lineker. Remember, Lineker, that was his 2nd or 3rd camp with ATT. Like, this is going to be Marlon Moraes, another smaller Brazilian. We saw boxing improvements against Sandhagen in that fight from Lineker. I'm going to be looking for those from Moraes, but my pick ultimately is going to be Sandhagen by decision, with leaving the door open for a late stoppage a la Aldo Holloway 1.
And speaking of Line Movement, make sure you'll go to linemovement.com, give this video a like and a subscribe. Hit that little bell thing so you'll get a notification anytime we drop a video. And also, as you already know, we're available on iTunes, Apple Podcasts. So hook us up with that 5-star review. We truly appreciate it. And on Twitter at line_movement. Now, last point on the fight, Dan Tom. And this is kind of a useless fact. I mean, these numbers, this number will still be the same no matter the outcome on Saturday night. You know, Marlon Moraes has won more decisions than Corey Sandhagen?
Yes, sir. Yes, he has. Yes, he has. I'm not even looking right now. I know what you're talking about. Yes, sir.
But the reason why it's a useless fact is because even if Corey Sandhagen wins this decision, Marlon Moraes will still have more decision wins than Corey Sandhagen. But I just felt like throwing it out there. So we're going opposite ways. Dan's going with Corey Sandhagen via decision. I'm going with Marlon Moraes via knockout. And let's see what happens Saturday night. Let us know in the comments below who you got. And I cannot wait for this fight, Dan Tom. Now, co-main event of the evening in the featherweight division, we got the second featherweight appearance of Edson Jr. Barboza, and he's taking on Makwan Amirkhani. And, there's always going to be that one striker versus grappler fight. But like we talked about last week, Dan Tom, sometimes the striker wins by submission, and sometimes the grappler wins by knockout. And last week, it was GDR that went out there, not just submitted Juliana Pena, even swept her and got a Von Flue attempt in the second round too. So let me ask you this. What kind of chance do you give Edson Barboza of submitting Makwan Amirkhani?
I think that's a great example. We should be looking for these grappler. That's a fun theme to keep your eye out that you pointed out there, Dan. However, I feel like that theme in your question you just bounced at me kind of parlays into this theme we've been seeing in the pandemic era, especially in this Fight Island run, which is questionable fight IQ. I think the person that's going to fall victim to that trap is more the matchup with, okay, who's got the most questionable fight IQ? And you know what? In defense of both guys, I don't think it's fight IQ that's necessarily failed either of these guys for their faults. I think Edson Barboza, I think stylistically we figured out who he is, and he is, in his defense, a consistent workhorse, whereas Makwan, you can say, a bunch of stuff about Makwan, opinionated, plus, minus, somewhere in the middle. But as far as faults go, I would say it's his cardio and, maybe following a close second. The second horse is going to be his chin. I don't think it's necessarily, as you guys over there, shout out to the Half the Battle podcast, like to call stunt pulling. You know what I'm saying? So in other words, I think the stunt pullers are going to answer your question, Dan. I don't think we have stunt pullers here, which is why, regardless of which way the fight goes, I think either guy will win on brand.
Well, Dan Tom, there's a couple things we got to talk about just specifically with Edson Barboza. So the narrative going around is that Edson Barboza is allegedly washed up. Now, is he, closer to the end of his career than the beginning of his career? Yes, I'll agree with that. But to act like, he's on like a Tyron Woodley level of wash is completely asinine, my man, because no, he's not. Here's why. Tyron Woodley has lost close to 15 straight rounds, my man. That's like over an hour of octagon. And he won't even throw a punch. Whereas Edson Barboza, yeah, he's losing to these top 10 guys, but he's fighting competitively with them still, Dan Tom. I mean, that fight with Paul Felder and Dan Ige arguably could have gone his way. Now, while I personally, upon rewatching them, scored them both against Edson Barboza, at the time of them happening live, I thought that Barboza won both those fights. But the bottom line is, one thing we cannot debate is that they were both very competitive back and forth fights. So that to me right there shows that, when people sit here and call Edson washed, it's like, again, like I said, yeah, he might not ever make another title run, but don't compare him to Woodley. I think that's completely disrespectful. And I honestly think that that's kind of a stupid argument, my man. And I think the proof is in the pudding when you watch those fights. And also, he could have fought Khabib Nurmagomedov at any point of his career, and it would have been a terrible stylistic matchup for him. He could have fought Kevin Lee at any point in his career, and it would have been a terrible stylistic matchup for him. He could have fought Justin Gaethje at any point in his career, and it would have been a terrible stylistic matchup for him. So just because he's losing to these top guys on planet Earth, I'm not going to hold that against him because Makwan Amirkhani is not a top 10 guy, is not a top 15 guy, in my opinion, isn't even a top 20 guy. Now, look, I got respect for Makwan Amirkhani because anytime you can go out there and get wins at the UFC level, hey, that's a big deal in itself, Dan Tom. And also, you got to respect his wrestling, even in the fights he's lost, like to Arnold Allen, to Shane Burgos, who I consider both to be top 15 guys. He landed takedowns in all those fights. And I'll say this, Dan Tom. If he gets one submission attempt on Edson Barboza, the fight might be over shortly after. Like, I'm not convinced that if Makwan Amirkhani puts his arms around the neck of Edson Barboza, that Edson's going to be able to survive that. That being said, will he get to that point? That's what I'm not convinced of, Dan Tom.
Yeah, me too, man. I put it this way. I want to back up your main point there. That was probably, about half of the theme of what you said, which is people thinking Edson Barboza's watch. I got to back you up here, Dan. And I'm not just trying to back up, my co-host here or anything like that, folks. I haven't officially picked Edson Barboza to win a fight since he fought Gilbert Melendez in 2016. I've only picked Edson Barboza officially. Yep. And I've only picked Edson Barboza to win officially once in the last 5 years. One of my biggest cashes before doing this podcast was, I believe, in the plus 200, maybe around plus 250 range, plus 220 range. I can't remember, for a Michael Johnson. And that last time he fought, a southpaw pressuring fighter, which is why I picked Dariush to beat him, even though Dariush didn't. Even if he looked good up until then, he didn't win that fight, folks. I'm sorry. I was wrong there. And for what it's worth, yes, Barboza is 2-1 officially against southpaws in his UFC career, going against southpaw Amirkhani here. The problem is Amirkhani is gas tank for me. And the fact that, Dan, there's some lines here that there's some sharp people like yourself perhaps can enlighten me and the masses on. And there's definitely grounds to it. At the same time, I almost scratch my head on matchups where we see proven products, the guys that have been around in tough divisions like 155, we talked about, the Bobby Greens of the world who also fought Edson. And Edson, say what you will, but the guy's a proven product. I got him on that Rafael Dos Anjos tier. You know what I'm saying? Like you said, he's always going, like Dos Anjos, he's always going to lose to the Khabibs. It's a stylistic thing. Yeah, if you have a stylistic matchup and you're one of the few athletes with the styles and one of the few top-ranked fighters who can push that, yeah, you're eventually going to start seeing some results in the later rounds in that case. But, I'll even put my man Luis Baboon Palomino, my Peruvian brother, up there. He's like those old workhorses where, okay, maybe they're not going to reach a championship tier level, and that becomes clear at a certain point of their career, but they're still going to show up for work. We like to throw the Brazilians, with the stereotype, like they'll quit or this or that, but there's this tier, and that's why I said I'm throwing Luis Baboon Palomino because he's not Brazilian, but there's this tier of like workhorse fighter where you can disrespect them, but you got to be careful, man. It's not like these guys aren't showing up for work. It's not like these guys aren't dangerous. And I agree with all your previous points as far as those matchups were tough. He was in it. And kind of furthermore, folks, I was somebody that didn't like this Barboza move to 45. Not because he's washed, but because I feel like if it doesn't work out for him, or when he finally moves up because he gets older to 55, I feel like when he moves up to 55, I feel like that's when he's going to become washed, folks. Not yet. He's made the commitment to 45. It's the bouncing, it's the going back up, and it's the damage that he's going to probably take at 45 is what I predicted. I didn't put dirt on Barboza's grave yet. In fact, I feel like he's one of the more proven spots as far as picking your angles here. I'm definitely going to be writing about this matchup, Dan, on my Line Movement betting article this week.
Yeah, so look, my official pick is Edson Barboza. I think that this is a spot, as long as he weathers this little early storm by Makwan Amirkhani, because I know Makwan's going to come out there hard, try to get on those legs early, and look, he might actually take down Barboza. We saw in that third round against Ige how easily Barboza gave up that takedown. But again, Ige, he had to go through some stuff before he got him to that point. He almost got finished in the first and second round to get to, the deep waters in the third to get him down. I'm not quite convinced Makwan can swim in those deep waters. But again, like I said, when you're talking about a minus 260 line, I need some insurance, man, that, because like I said, I know for a fact that Makwan gets one submission attempt and the fight might be over. You know what I mean? Edson, he doesn't exactly come back from submission attempts. But that being said, for Makwan to actually get to that point, he's got to walk through the best kicker, arguably in UFC history. I mean, up there with Jose Aldo or Marlon Moraes or some of these other guys. Anthony Pettis back in the day. You remember Anthony Pettis's body kick back in the day. So Edson Barboza's up there as far as being the hardest kicker in UFC history. I mean, who else has got knockouts via head kick, body kick, and leg kick in the UFC? Barboza has. That's pretty damn impressive, man. So I'm going to go with Edson Barboza here, man. I think that he stuffs the takedowns, and I think it's going to get to one of these points where, like, eventually Makwan starts shooting from a mile out, and then he starts flopping to his back. Then he starts asking him to come into his guard. Then the ref has to step in between them, tell him to get up, and then he just starts eating a bunch of hard kicks, and then eventually a spin puts him out. So I'm going with Barboza via TKO.
I'm with the TKO finish as well. I think the butterfly guard has always been good and underrated. His wrestling's always been underrated. And unless he either gets club and sub by a guy Cerrone level, which happened over 6 years ago, or a guy like Tony Ferguson, who I hold in high esteem, and Makwan doesn't have the gas tank. I don't see the sub coming to fruition unless Edson just gives him the head front headlock and lets him play with it. I don't see that happening. So I'll go with Barboza by TKO as well.
Now, Dan Tom, in the heavyweight division, we got a matchup between Big Ben Rothwell and Marcin Tybura. And this could be one of those heavyweight fights where if there's not a finish, these guys might gas out quick, and it might not be the prettiest. But that being said, they got Ben Rothwell as a decent-sized favorite here. And the interesting part about it is that I do favor Rothwell to win. It's just that if he doesn't get that knockout, I could see it getting kind of sketchy, Dan Tom. What do you think about that? I mean, do you see it as that type of situation, or do you think Ben Rothwell can possibly win a decision here too?
I think Ben Rothwell can win any way he wants, man. And this is another line that confuses me. Again, this could be contrarianness coming to kick me in the butt, which it definitely has this pandemic run. But at the same time, when everybody's piling their money on certain places, I find myself looking at other places. And don't get me wrong, folks, heavyweight is an untrustworthy place. Proven product or not proven product, always squint when you see a heavyweight line anywhere north of minus 200. However, I'm seeing minus 150 or minus 159 on Rothwell. I'm like, wait, okay, so it opened at what, minus 240 or 230, and people bet it down, right? Wrong. This opened at minus 105 Rothwell. What the hell am I missing? I know the King Kenosha has been taking a beating from people online for sticking up for social justice, God forbid. But I mean, aside from that, and he's got his own gym. So even with the lockdowns, which a lot of the states have moved past, is there something that I'm missing? He looks big coming in. Well, he's Big Ben. He always looks big. He could fight tired. To be honest, Big Ben, when he's got his cardio performances on whether he's, popping clean or not trying to take a shot, just stating it for what it is, or it's his less impressive performances, there's not really a big barometer, and he's not typically gassing beyond detriment. Is he running into a very doctor-friendly JDS, front kick every once in a while and ruining his heavyweight run? Yeah, he'll do stuff like that. And yes, Tybura has the front kick that he picked up from his days at the Jackson Wink camp. I don't know if that weird hammer fist that he does in the clinch is going to have play, because he's not going to be the taller guy with Big Ben. He's not going to be the bigger guy. And if he goes with his cage pressing, which Tybura's been doing, and Tybura, I know you guys on Half the Battle have talked about his shape, and I sign off on you guys. He did make some attempts. I was laughing when he said he was going to use his cardio to beat Grisham. But you know what? It was an ugly fight. But you know what? He did what he said he was going to do. Tybura did use his cardio. But even if he has that cardio, I don't think he has the size or the skill to be manhandling Ben for all three of those rounds without either getting submitted, running into an elbow, or getting reversed and getting kind of out fat heavyweight by the guy who's the king of not just Kenosha, but of fat heavyweight action, which is Ben Rothwell. He was even able to do it against an athlete coming up in Oven St. Preux, who's shown he's not done. I'm sorry I'm ranting here, but why the heck is Tybura aligned so closely here, Dan?
All right, so let me say this. So in my personal opinion, Dan Tom, ever since Ben Rothwell popped, I don't think he's looked that good. You know, the Blagoy Ivanov and the Andrei Arlovsky fights, I thought he looked like the slowest heavyweight on the roster. The Stefan Struve fight, he was losing the entire fight until that unfortunate low blow and then the TKO. The Oven St. Preux fight, let's call it for what it is, that fight was a shit show. But that being said, he's fighting Marcin Tybura, who, man, I've just never been high on. You know, I remember when I max bet Marcin Tybura to beat Andrei Arlovsky, and he made me sweat in a way where I was like, dude, not to be disrespectful, but I started calling him Fraud Bura after that. You know what I mean, Dan Tom? And I think it's one of these situations where, you know, I was really happy when I cashed on Augusto Sakai to beat Marcin Tybura. But here in this fight, so what's interesting about it is that I feel like Tybura's got a speed advantage over Rothwell. It's just that he's not that confident in his abilities. He's also, you know, kind of been putting on a little bit of weight, like you alluded to. So I don't know. I don't really think that Tybura can come out here and, you know, put up a takedown number on him or anything like that. I think he's going to be hugging him for dear life. It's just that when Ben Rothwell finally decides to let it go, that's when it's going to be the time when he puts him down. And also, I don't know if you remember from back in the day, but you remember that third round in the Brandon Vera fight when Ben Rothwell starts doing that dance? When Ben Rothwell starts doing the dance, look out, because that's when bodies usually hit the floor. So I'm going to go with, you know, kind of a sketchy early start, but I think somewhere along the way, Ben Rothwell puts him down.
Yeah, man. I'm glad you brought up the sketchy factor, because if anything, I know when neither of us are high in Tybura. That being said, you can't underestimate that heavyweight sweatiness. And if it goes to an ugly fight, I don't think that Tybura's speed will make much of a difference or last long enough to make a difference. But you're right, it could get ugly in there. And with the judges being as they are, you know, we've seen fighter performances with the sleep schedule still. I'm not putting it past these guys to just both put out a stinker collectively. But I'm still questioning the line. And let's just say I may be writing about this line and targeting this line out of principle.
Well, Dan Tom, also in the heavyweight division, we got Tom Aspinall taking on Alan Baudot. And Dan Tom, so it's not often you see these young heavyweight prospects come into the UFC and, you know, really you take notice of a young heavyweight prospect because, as you know, usually heavyweights don't, hit their prime until their late 30s, maybe even early 40s. So to see a young 25, 26-year-old like Tom Aspinall, and he's got the physical attributes, you know, he's 6'5", and he's got a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and to take it a step further, the guy's boxing is pretty damn clean too. He even spars with Tyson Fury. So getting in that kind of work, I feel like is only going to elevate his game to that next level. And he's a heavyweight prospect we got to take note of, man. I think that this kid can be something. Now, I might be a little biased because when I saw Jay Collier weigh in at 265 pounds, I instantly hammered Tom Aspinall at the betting window. And honestly, man, I think they opened this line a little bit too low. You know, I felt like even though minus 350 isn't oftentimes something I want to lay, there's exceptions, man. Like, you remember last week with Dusko Todorovic and Daquan? Like, yeah, it was minus 350. I played it straight because it should have been minus 1,500, you know, and that's not, I'm not exaggerating. If I'm exaggerating, I'll say it should have been minus 3,600, but it should have realistically been minus 1,000 to minus 1,500 for Dusko. There was no chance Dusko was going to lose to Daquan Townsend. So I had no issues playing minus 350 straight. And this fight, look, now at minus 500 to minus 550 to minus 600, okay, you can sit back and watch it. But I think if you got in at minus 350 on a spot like this, I don't think there's anything wrong with that because Alan Baudot, yeah, if you want to wiki cap it and it says that he won his last fight, well, you're already putting yourself at a disadvantage because he got choked out his last fight. The only reason it says he won is because, you know, some bullshit marijuana, you know, they overturned it, gave the other guy the win. You know what I mean? But Alan Baudot has zero business in the UFC, let alone the heavyweight division. I mean, this is a guy, I know you remember when you were scouting the footage on Dalcha Lunjambula and you watched Dalcha Lunjambula faceplant some guy in 20 seconds. Well, that guy he faceplanted in 20 seconds was Alan Baudot. And then you take it a step further, you watch his last fight, which he got choked out in the third round. I don't know why it says he won. I mean, dude, that shit is not going to fly at the UFC level. Now, look, we can talk about the fact how Aspinall's never won a fight that's gone past the first round, and down the line, that's going to be a factor. But in this fight against this guy, it's not going to matter because I don't think this fight's going past the first round either, Dan Tom. I got Tom Aspinall via vicious first round knockout, my friend.
Yeah, I don't blame you, man. That record's tricky. You know why? He lost to those guys, man, because those are the only guys with winning records. In fact, he actually the only technically dude he beat with a winning record was Dongxing Wu, who was 4-3-1. I know, astounding record. I mean, this guy hasn't just lost to Dolce. Like this guy's lost to Japanese dudes where he was tossed out of the ring. Like, he got tossed out of the ring by a Japanese dude named Oka Tomoyuki. So I mean, I don't know what this guy is. But, this guy's gonna probably be tossed out in similar fashion, unfortunately, unless he pulls out some magic. Because unless he comes out looking like MMA Factory alum Francis Ngannou, but I don't think that's the same guy. Yes, he's got some size to him. He's 6'4", but I was not impressed from the very little I saw. Whereas Aspinall, who looks like a mix of if Frank Mir had a child with Bellator's PR guy Danny Brenner, shouts to Danny Brenner. That's who this guy looks like. But no, you're right. He's a two-time British champ, has some boxing experience. Yes, he's credited with a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. So hopefully he just enjoys this slow rub, and he should go in here and act accordingly. And yeah, man, I mean, this is one of those cases where, again, like I mentioned, I'm not hating for the fights people are piling on because there's real value here. I even agreed with you, Dan. There was value on Dusko last week. Props to you for actually ponying up and playing that straight. There are those opportunities, like Dan said, folks, for those looking to bet that way. It's not as common in MMA, but it kind of should be. It feels like, Dan. Maybe that's another betting conversation for another day. But yeah, I don't hate that take. I'm on Aspinall here too.
Yeah, and I mean, look, people can sit here and do the whole, but Baudau's trained with Francis Ngannou in the past, and it's like, guys, firstly, Francis Ngannou lives in Vegas and trains in Vegas, but secondly, so we got knocked out in the gym by Francis Ngannou and Cyril Gane. That means I'm supposed to pick him here. And you want to take it a step further, not to disappoint my Canadian friends, but I kind of got to build off this thing I've been saying for a little bit, man. No offense, but that TKO scene is extremely suspect. I've been saying it every single week. I mean, we saw Air Jordan was the biggest favorite on the entire card, getting dropped in the first round, going to a draw. We saw the week prior, TJ Laramie, biggest favorite on the card, gets submitted in under a minute. And now this guy, Baudau, is coming off allegedly a win in the third round against whatever the guy's name is, Stout or something like that, also in TKO. So as soon as I see that they fought in TKO, if your name is not George St. Pierre, who only fought there twice, or Hakeem Douadou, or even Tanner Boser, Tanner Boser actually never fought in TKO, but he's one of the top Canadian prospects in the UFC today. If your name is not one of those guys, then like I'm gonna take a close look with a magnifying glass, because there might be a chance that they don't belong in the UFC. And no disrespect to Alan Baudot, but Dan Tom, he does not belong in the UFC. I got Aspinall by first round knockout.
I'm with you there, buddy.
Now, Dan Tom, this fight in the middleweight division between Tom Breeze and KB Bueller is an interesting one, because, we often talk about, or I often talk about how, certain lines, I need insurance. Now, Tom Breeze has this guy covered across the board. It's just that I need to know that Tom Breeze is feeling good upstairs and that he's going to show up on fight day. And if I have any proof of that, I mean, I think he could be worth a bet. It's just that I don't have any inside information about Tom Breeze. I'm not friends with anyone in his camp. I don't know him personally, so I can't confirm nor deny where he's at in terms of his headspace. But I can just tell you this, Dan Tom, when you're dealing with what he's dealing with, which is, severe anxiety, I can just tell you firsthand, it's a real thing. It doesn't matter who you are. It can literally cripple you. So when you're talking about a guy like Tom Breeze, look, he's got, like I said, he's got this kid beat everywhere. I mean, he's a better boxer. He's got better jiu-jitsu. He's got more experience. He's literally better across the board. He should come out here and knock out KB Bueller in the first round. It's just that, is it going to surprise me if Tom Breeze doesn't quite want to be there and KB Bueller is just the hungrier guy and gets the win? No, it's not. But before we talk about that, Dan Tom, I want to say one thing. KB Bueller just avoided the biggest ass whooping in Contender Series history against Bruno Oliveira. Like, oh my God, no one even knows about this, but I was going to have not only my first bet in Contender Series history, but my first max bet in Contender Series history against Bruno Oliveira, who's a hidden gem that no one knows about in the middleweight division. I mean, this guy's 6'5" with an 82-inch reach, and he is a knockout machine, a serious Muay Thai striker, a guy that trains with Thiago Maeda Santos. You guys got to look out for Bruno Oliveira. And I was thinking to myself, like, why did they give KB Bueller the call and not Bruno Oliveira? And then I was like, you know what? Probably because let's give Tom Breeze an opportunity to come out here and win a fight. You know, like, let's give Tom Breeze someone that's not intimidating. Let's give Tom Breeze someone that's not overly powerful. Because Bruno Oliveira, let's be honest, if he was fighting Tom Breeze, I'd be all over that too. And also, let's showcase Bruno Oliveira on Contender Series. Let him headline on his episode, get a big knockout, then we sign him to the UFC. So I get what they're doing. It's just that, you know, with KB Bueller, man, he lucked out, dude. He lucked out to a point where, like, he was going to get knocked out in the first round by Bruno Oliveira, and then his UFC opportunity was going to go up in flames. But now he gets to bypass that tough fight with Bruno Oliveira. Now he gets to fight Tom Breeze, which I think Tom Breeze should win. It's just that if Tom Breeze, for whatever reason, doesn't show up, it could be a winnable fight for KB Bueller. Now, look, as far as KB Bueller is concerned, you know, he's 6'4". He's a very tall guy, and he's not bad anywhere. I mean, he's decently well-rounded. He's just not the most intimidating guy. He's not very powerful. He's just kind of a serviceable guy. I mean, look, if you gas out on him, he can be kind of opportunistic. But if you put up any kind of resistance against this guy, I feel like Tom Breeze should cruise here. At minus 260, Dan, Tom, I need insurance that Tom Breeze is showing up on Fight Night. You know what I mean? Look, if it's minus 140, I'm betting Tom Breeze. Minus 260, I need a little insurance, my man. But the pick is Tom Breeze. I mean, he's far superior than KB Bueller.
Yeah, for the line tells me to start looking the other way. But I haven't run KB Bueller through the full comb. But from what I've seen to what shows up here on my sheet, there's not a lot that's promising. You know, yeah, he's tall. He switched stances a bit. Maybe that comes from, you know, Taekwondo as introduction martial art, but he's only been training for 10 years total by his own admission. As far as that goes, got introduced to jiu-jitsu and Taekwondo, has a unified MMA middleweight title, but really outside of that, I feel like Breeze has him outskilled. But yeah, man, if anybody's sympathetic with Breeze, it's me. But like, it's so hard to trust. It's so hard to trust him, you know, as far as from a betting perspective, you know, if he's going to show up or what's going to happen. And I don't mean to sound insensitive. Like, I'm a big Breeze fan. I always have been, even from when he was coming into the UFC. This guy looked like he was the freaking Kurgan, for people who know that reference. You know, he had like the darkness around his eyes. He just looked like evil, right? And he's got underrated jiu-jitsu game. You know, he seemed to be working on his wrestling maybe. You know, that was something he needed to work on. He started working a lot on his boxing. I haven't given up on him. I'm hoping he shows up. I'm definitely leaning toward him as far as a pick goes. But as far as a play, like, this is starting to get in the stay away territory for me, to be honest. However, I will say for fighters, I said in the beginning of the pandemic era, any fighters that have kind of anxieties or performance anxieties, I wonder if they're going to perform better. And some of them have, you know, like Jack Hermanson went out and, you know, scored an upset, an odds-on upset, and some other guys who have kind of had these performance anxieties before, win or lose, right? So let's see. Without the crowd, maybe Breeze can, you know, this is in the matchup, this could be that perfect, like, pick-me-up fight for Breeze. So I'm going to pick Breeze here.
No, it definitely is a pick-me-up fight for Breeze. No questions asked. It's just that when you're dealing with anxiety, you can fight the worst opponent and still lose. Because I don't know if you remember, but he was supposed to fight Oluwale Bangbose, and he pulled out of that fight on fight day. And that's like the most winnable fight on the roster at the time. Now, granted, it was a different situation. It was in England, which, you know, he's from England. A lot of pressure there. So maybe you're onto something in terms of the Fight Island scenario. But as far as Jack Hermanson, while he's a great example, Jack Hermanson's a top 5 guy. You know what I mean? Jack Hermanson's one of the best fighters on planet Earth. Now, that's no disrespect to Tom Breeze. I think he's got a lot of skills, but, you know, we're dealing with a top 50 guy with Tom Breeze here. But yeah, look, I think Tom Breeze has good boxing. He's got a good leg lock game. It's just about where's Tom Breeze at upstairs. You know what I mean? Because look, this is not Ian Heinisch anymore. This is not Brendan Allen anymore. Like, this is the most winnable fight you've had in years, man. So I really hope that Tom Breeze, and look, as a man, I got nothing but respect for Tom Breeze to be open about that stuff, to try to overcome it, to be in the public eye and let people know what's really going on. Because he could have just said, "Oh, I had an injury" or whatever. But like, he's 100% honest. So as a man, he's got my respect. But as a betting man, I have to be harsh. I have to, maybe come off as a dick. I got to be 100% realistic, because when you're talking about my money, there's no sympathy when we talk about money, at least as far as I'm concerned, Dan Tom, especially when you talk about minus 260. So I've been using this term a lot. I need insurance that he's showing up on Saturday night. But just as Daniel Levy, the man, Tom Breeze, you got my full respect, bro. Like, and I hope that you've been battling through this. Funny enough, if I hear one of his interviews and I find out that he downloaded one of those meditation apps, then maybe I'll go to the betting window and bet on him. You know what I'm saying, Dan Tom? But the thing is, if you don't address this kind of stuff, it's only going to continue to bring you down. So I don't have any proof of what he's been doing, if he's been talking to someone or whatever the case is. So I'm going to personally stay away. But the pick is Tom Breeze. He's the far superior fighter here.
I'm with all that.
Now, Dan Tom, also in the middleweight division, we got an exciting matchup between one of my top middleweight prospects, Impa Kasangana, and he's taking on Joaquin Buckley. And, I got to say, I saw Impa Kasangana fight in person when he was only 4-0 in Atlanta, Georgia, at the Roxy Theater. He fought, one of our local guys named Tubbs, and it says officially he won a split decision, but between you and me, Dan Tom, that shit was no split decision. I had it 30-27 for Impa, but sometimes the hometown guy might get a little love. I mean, he sold a lot of tickets for that show, so who knows what the deal is. Not talking shit about the Georgia officials, but I'm just saying, how the hell did one judge score that fight for Tubbs? So, but all that aside, Impa's one of these guys, because you know how I like to talk about these kids with 10 or less pro fights. They're going to be making huge improvements every single fight. But when you talk about someone who's got the athletic potential of Impa, the improvements are like night and day, Dan Tom, because you compare his second Contender Series appearance to his Maki Pitolo fight, which is only 1 month separated from each other. Like, dude, he just keeps getting better and better. And the thing I like most about him, like, look, we can talk about his physique. We can talk about his power. We can talk about his wrestling. And right there, I'm showing how well-rounded he is. But that's not what I want to talk about, Dan Tom. I want to talk about this kid's will to win. I want to talk about his championship mindset. You hear this guy talk, and you already know, hey, he's going places. Like, he's got the intelligence. And, not to bring up the fact that he's got a bachelor's in accounting and finance. He's a very smart guy. But this is one of these guys that, like, he's going to be the real deal. He will be a future top 15 guy. I'm calling it right now. Impa Kasangana is someone to look out for. And look, with Joaquin Buckley, he's exciting. He throws big bombs. It's just that there's not much depth to his game, and that's no disrespect. He's a guy I enjoy watching. Anyone that steps in the cage, let alone throws big bombs like he does, like, hey, very, very fun to watch. But when we're talking about betting, Dan Tom, I want a guy that, when it's 1-1 going into that third round, that's going to bite down on that mouthpiece, get that takedown, and, get the judge's decision. I want a guy that is willing to win the fight by any means necessary, no matter what it takes. And that's what Impa Kasangana is, man. He is the complete package. He is the real deal. And I think Saturday night in Yas Island, Abu Dhabi, Fight Island, I think he's going to come out here and defeat Joaquin Buckley soundly.
I think so too. I think the question more for me is it going to go long, inside the distance, or decision? Now I think it's going to go long toward decision category. Maybe have some similarities to the Logan Storley fight, in the sense that we're going to see some grinding and some wrestling from Impa, because the speed and that southpaw stance will be interesting as far as Joaquin Buckley is concerned. However, one of his many southpaw trading partners, they got a lot down there. You got more of the grappling southpaw and John Salter, I believe, but he also has Brian Barberena as far as a well, Barberena, let's face it, Brian Barberena is practically a middleweight right now, right? So
heavyweight.
Yeah. So but he can still throw, right? He's got that underrated boxing savvy. So I got to imagine with them being active, kind of around each other, that's got to be another good training partner there as far as that goes. So I don't know if the southpaw card that your boy Dan Tom will always point out and point to will have a lot of play as far as in Buckley's favor. I think we're going to see more of Buckley's takedown defense where that's at. However, when it goes to decision, which isn't much with Buckley, doesn't seem to do well. One of his 2 wins is by split. And again, the best guy that he wants the decision with, he lost to. So I think we could see that again. And hopefully the mat time is needed. It's not a bad thing for impa, but hopefully people, don't hold it against him. Impa seems like he's level-headed. He's not going to let it get to him. The pressure of, oh, you got to finish to be, ranked or this or that. Like impa will get there, man. He's a special kid. I see really good things for him as well. So I'm not worried, man. I'm not worried if he doesn't get the finish here. I think this is a great matchup. And I think we could see him get a lot of mat time because of it. Now, if he was a little bit emotional or, could get lulled into things, then I would worry because Buckley can swing seriously. But, Buckley doesn't come from a wrestling or boxing background. He pretty much just right from 18 out of the jumped in MMA. And he's still rounding out his game. But I'll take impa Kasangana by decision here, Dan.
But Dan Tom, Maki Pitolo can swing seriously too. And we saw exactly how impa Kasangana dealt with that. And not only that, I think there's honestly zero chance that impa Kasangana gets emotional. He's just too smart for that kind of stuff. On rare occasions, a guy will come along every once in a while and you hear him talk and he's just got that it factor about him where you're like, hey, this can truly be someone down the line. Impa Kasangana ain't going to come out here and stand and bang for his ego. And, if he doesn't get the finish, then the guy that needs the finish here is Joaquin Buckley. If Joaquin Buckley doesn't get the finish, then he's in big trouble because he only has one way he can win this fight. He's got to come out here, swing bombs, and pray for a knockout. He doesn't get that knockout, he's losing this fight, period. The thing with impa Kasangana, he's got so many paths to victory here. He can grind this guy. He can look. Would I want him to stand and bang with him? It's not my preferred method, but if he chooses to do that, he stood and bang with Maki Pitolo, who I think is a lot better than Joaquin Buckley. So I know that worst case scenario, he goes out there and trades with this guy. I think he can win like that too. But he's too smart for Joaquin Buckley, man. No disrespect to Joaquin. I enjoy watching him fight, but fight IQ is a real thing. You know that, Dan Tom. Intelligence is a real thing. Impa's going to come out here. When Joaquin's looking for the takedown, that's when Impa's going to strike. When Impa's looking at the strikes, that's when, when Joaquin's looking for the takedown, that's when Impa's going to strike. When Joaquin's looking for the strikes, that's when Impa's going to shoot for the takedown. Also, he's going to pin him up against the fence, grind him down. I just see there's just a big difference here between the two, man. So a lot of people think the line is wide. I personally think the line is short. So I'm going to go with impa Kasangana to win this fight. Now, Dan Tom, moving down to the bantamweight division, we got a matchup between Tony Kelly and Ali Alcasey. And this is an interesting fight because Tony Kelly, he went out there in that UFC debut, and even though he didn't get the dub, he put out some serious numbers in terms of output, man. It says that he lands over 7 strikes per minute, and he attempted 300 strikes in his UFC debut against Kai Kamaka, who's a serious featherweight prospect. And now Tony Kelly's dropping a weight class to bantamweight. And even though it might be kind of concerning, this big guy who's in his 30s dropping, like, to me, it just means that he has to, run extra miles, put in a little more work, and he's going to do it fine. You see the kind of shape he's in. He looks pretty damn ripped to me. So with Ali Alcasey, on the feet, he's kind of stiff. I'm going to be 100% honest with you. He doesn't have the best volume. The one thing he does have going for him, he's got some decent wrestling. He might be able to get a couple takedowns. It's just I'm not convinced how good his top control actually is. And if you watch his regional scene footage, he did a couple no-nos that wouldn't fly on the UFC level, such as going for guillotines, and when the guy passes your guard, he hasn't let go of the neck yet. In the UFC, that's a Von Flu ready to happen, my man. And you also saw that last fight against Erwin Rivera. And look, I like Erwin. He's very exciting to watch, but Alcasey got zero top control when he took him down. You know what I mean? Irwin was able to pop back up. So I think that as long as Tony Kelly doesn't get laid on for extended periods of time, I think that the volume difference is going to be huge. I think there's going to be a striking differential in this fight, my friend. And I think there's even a chance of a stoppage. But the thing is, Alcasey is really tough. So I'm going to go with Tony Kelly by decision. But I won't be surprised if he knocks him out. It's just that the output difference is going to be huge here. Like I said, there's going to be a strike differential. Don't get laid on and you win this fight. So I'm going with Tony Kelly for the win.
Yeah, I don't hate that. I'm giggling. I don't know how I didn't realize this before, but Ali Alcasey's Sherdog picture, for whatever reason, it's at Extreme Couture, like my Extreme Couture, the one here in Vegas. So I was just laughing at that. But yeah, man, it's funny because both guys that come from traditional martial arts. You know, you got Ali Alcasey from Kung Fu Sanda. He's got majority of his accolades within there, whereas you got Tony Kelly. He comes from Kyokushin karate black belt. That's the same sect, more sport karate based, that George St. Pierre comes from, folks, if that sounds familiar. He's also got a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and so does Ali Alcasey. So they're both very similar, but when it comes to the striking and the clinch, I feel like one guy has been able to meld the style much better, and that's clearly Tony Kelly. He's got the distance that he can be comfortable at as a karate guy. But I was pretty impressed with a lot of the clinch stuff that was quietly going on between him and Kamaka there. And I think that's going to come in handy. You know, that's going to be a real entry point because Ali Alcasey, it's mainly his wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that's usually getting him his wins. And you talk about fight IQ. I know what you mean, Dan. I always worry, too, when guys like list their favorite move is the guillotine over everything else when they're just coming into the UFC. And I'm like, oh, great. If this fails, they're going to lose position. That's awesome. And you can see some of that in his fights too. So for that case, I'll go with Tony Kelly. This guy seems like a scrapper, man. He seems like he really has to give everything to go to 135. But I don't think that's worry. I think that's more worrisome if he was facing, one of 135's many heavy hitters or knockout punchers. Then you kind of start to question him getting into those wars. That is Tony Kelly. He's not a spring chicken. I believe he's like 33 or 32. But that's not what you got to worry about here in this fight, obviously. I think Ali Alcasey's was one, TKO, you know what I'm saying? Like, we're not going to worry about him with a one-punch KO here. So whether he gets it done inside or just outworks him over the stretch, I think Tony Kelly gets the win here. And seeing him up to about minus 230 now doesn't really surprise me to see him in that neighborhood.
Yeah. So again, man, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out because he wasn't able to hold Irwin Rivera down. So I'm hoping, for Tony Kelly's sake, I know you love that guillotine, man, but look, I heard one of his interviews and he even said that, like, man, I was getting, the better of some of the exchanges and then I jumped for a guillotine. He even called that an amateur move. So I like that self-reflection. I like that accountability.
Yep.
Now it's a question of, are you going to do it again or are you going to learn from your lesson? The thing is, man, Ali Alcasey, he needs some work. Now, we could sit here and we can talk about these Abu Dhabi judges, but honestly, man, I don't feel like they've been that bad. Like, I felt like, Hakeem Duadu got the split over Tukugov. So I feel like they've been, for the most part, getting these fights right. Vegas has had the questionable decisions lately, not Abu Dhabi. So even though Ali Alcasey, he's from the Middle East, so if it's close, might be sketchy, but I'm not convinced it's going to be that close just because, again, the striking differential here for Tony Kelly is so big that if this cut goes well, I think that he's going to come out here and have some success. So, like I said, I'm rolling with Tony Kelly in this fight, my man.
Yeah, good point. And I don't think the judges will be foul play. I know I joked about that before, folks. Relax. I gave good reasons for my fight picks, and I agreed the right man won. So I was glad that the judge got it right in that case for Duodu. But he's not one of the guys I joke about, like an Azatar or an Ahmad guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, usually there's reasons behind my jokes, and I don't see any of those reasons as jokingly as they are. I don't think any of that comes into play. I agree with you as far as your take on this fight goes, though, as far as the pick.
Yes, sir. And for all the fans, let us know who you got down below. Give this video a like and a subscribe, or follow us at line_movement. Go to linemovement.com. And Dan Tom, speaking of someone dropping a weight class, next up in the featherweight division, we got a matchup between Omar Morales and Giga Chikadze. And I mean, this fight right here, if this fight is boring, I will be very, very surprised, my man, because you got two former kickboxers going at it. Obviously, Giga's got the glory credentials, but Omar's no slouch on the feet either. And, you know, Omar, he's dropping to featherweight. And I see a lot of people talking about how, you know, he looked pretty big at 55. How's he going to cut the weight? And honestly, man, I'm not worried at all about Omar's weight cut because if you know about the Latin warriors, man, and you think about this guy, you know, moving from Venezuela to the United States, probably didn't have much money in his pocket, all for, you know, the one goal of pursuing a dream. This isn't the kind of guy that's going to be at the McDonald's drive-through fucking off. This isn't the kind of guy who's going to be skipping practices. Omar Morales takes this extremely seriously, and I will be shocked if he has any issues on the scale on Saturday. In fact, quote me on it, I think he's going to look absolutely shredded at 145. I think it's going to be like, oh, damn, this was the right weight class for him all along. But with Giga Chikadze, he's a very underrated guy as well, man. He's one of the few that's been able to transition from that high-level kickboxing background and make it work in MMA. Because as you know, Dan Tom, the distance is very different. There's a ground game in MMA too. I know you know that, Dan Tom. You know, you see some of these kickboxers come in like the great Gokhan Saki. You saw what happened when he came in here, my man. I don't think this is going to be one of those situations. You know, I feel like Giga Chikadze is surrounded by the right people. He's in there with Beneil Dariush every day. You're in there with a black belt like Beneil Dariush for years on end. I mean, even if jiu-jitsu is not your strength, you're going to be getting better. That's just the bottom line. So I feel like, you know, to sit here and act like it's a one takedown and the fight's over shortly after situation, you know, it's just not the case. This is going to be a real fight. So now the question is, who do you give the edge to, you know? And it's a tough one for me to pick. And oftentimes when it's tough for me to pick, I roll with the dog. It's just I'm not quite sure in this spot yet. So I want to hear your take, and then I'm going to give my pick. So who you got between Giga and Omar?
Well, as much as I'm impressed with Giga Chikadze's third Dan in Ryu Karate, you know, Dan Tom loves traditional martial arts. Your boy, Dan, Omar. He not only he's got his own kickboxing accolades, which are legit, but he's got a third Dan in Slam. And in parentheses, I'm reading off his UFC profile they send out. It says, free system of martial arts created by my father. I'm not dissing on that. All I'm saying, Dan, is if I was a third Dan black belt in Slam, I'd be telling that to all the ladies on the first date. That aside, Dan, we really got to come up with the scale. I think Robin Black has some kind of like Alvarez, something like a damage scale. Like, speaking of the kickboxing, you know, you mentioned Saki, like, you know, like from really successful kickboxers to really unsuccessful, would it be like a Saki Adesanya scale, or would it be like a Adesanya Cyril Diabate scale? You know, is where do you fall as far as the kickboxers that transfer over? Answer me that in a second. But as far as answering your question, I'm really interested in this matchup, man. Obviously, the accolades, they stack up really well. Who can transfer it more? You know, we've seen Giga be able to get an arm bar before. He is training down there. I have some friends of the aforementioned behind the scenes, John Rico, that our producer there, Jordan, mentioned, trains down at King's MMA. I know he's he said some things about Giga before. But I've had trouble picking his fights, man. So I want to go back over the comb with this one. I also want to go back and watch Omar's last fight. I remember you speaking about him, Dan, and then he caught my eye, of course, in that fight. I do agree with you on your previous point. I don't think it's that much of a flag, despite he is going against a striker. I know what I just said, but if he gets knocked out by Giga, I don't think it's going to be the weight cut is what necessarily made or broke him, if that makes sense. I look at him similar to a Barboza and Omar Morales guy. You know, this is a guy. He's like those classic like Muay Thai kickboxing guys, in the sense like they'll put on the Thai boxing song, and you know they'll cut their calories and do extra rounds in the bag and do extra running. Like, especially in this pandemic era, they're the old school kickboxing kind of style of thought to his region. Yeah, I don't see any of that coming into play here. It's more of who wants to change things up and adjust and adjust. But as far as a pick goes, I'm probably leaning toward Giga right now. But the odds kind of have me curious. I want to see if he opened as the dog. Maybe it's just my bias. I know sometimes you'll do the same thing, Dan. If you feel the matchup's close, maybe you'll kind of biasly be leaning toward the dog, but no, Giga actually opened as a dog not much further at plus 115. So it definitely has my interest. I have respect for Morales. I just got to make sure that he's a deserved favorite before I make a decision here.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfectly reasonable. I can't argue with anything that you said, and I think that if it's a 3-round kickboxing match, I mean, like, yeah, I mean, if you're telling me that Giga Chikadze is guaranteed to have a 3-round kickboxing match in MMA, I mean, at dog odds, I don't really see the issue with that. It's just one of those things, man, where, look, I got to give a lot of respect to Giga because, you know, when you were talking about that scale, to sit here and act like at this point that he's just a kickboxer, that would mean that you haven't been taking note of his progression. Because if you watch him on Contender Series and you compare it to his current run in the UFC, I mean, dude, he's been evolving. He's been putting in work. He's been addressing all areas of his game. So I like what I've been seeing from him. I mean, because like I said, when he was doing his Contender Series fight, he was only a kickboxer there. He had 0 takedown defense, no ground game. He got submitted by a guy that honestly wouldn't even last a minute with him if they fought again. But with Omar, despite the improvements of Giga, I do feel like Omar is the more well-rounded guy. It's just that I would be kind of sketched if they got into this 3-round kickboxing match, and I would not be surprised at all if Giga got the better of that. I guess the reason why he's the favorite is because he does have a little bit of, you know, offensive wrestling in his back pocket that we have seen in some of his UFC fights. You know, if shit is not going his way, he might be able to revert or resort to that takedown and get this to the mat, maybe get some top control. So, man, this is a really tough fight for me to call, man. And honestly, I'm not even sure if it's a dog or pass situation or a favorite or pass situation. This is one of those fights where, like, I can sit here and bullshit and, you know, make a case for either guy. Since you made the case for Giga, I'll make the case for Omar. I'll just say that, you know, he's slightly more well-rounded, but like, dude, again, I've been taking note of these improvements Giga's been making, and he's starting to be a threat off his back. He's starting to stuff these takedowns. He's starting to be able to get back up from bottom. So you cannot take anything away from him. I'm just going to say that, you know, Omar's a slightly bigger guy. He'll be able to hang with Giga on the feet. But the real difference is if shit's not going his way, he'll be able to mix in a takedown or two and potentially get the decision. So it's not necessarily a reluctant pick because I got so much respect for both guys. It's just kind of like a, I don't really know who's going to win this fight pick. But I'll go with Omar Morales via very close decision here.
Yeah, and last note on that, I was impressed with Morales when I saw him in person at Contender Series. And even though I haven't gone back to watch since I've watched live his last 2 fights, Dan, am I wrong here? Where I almost got that Brad Riddell vibe off of him a little bit. They're different, but as far as just the subtly well-rounded kickboxer, like I agree with you. Not just from his record or wiki capping, like the dude is probably more well-rounded as far as now he's solid as his physique looks. You know what I'm saying? But like he kind of gives me that Brad Riddell vibe. I don't know if I'm off there, but yeah, I'm real interested in this fight.
I don't see why you'd be off there. I mean, they're both guys that transition from kickboxing into MMA. They're pretty decent wherever the fight goes. And again, it's not a situation where the guy's, you know, purely a kickboxer and you take him down one time and he's a fish out of water. You know, this is a guy that you give him enough time to catch up and he will be attacking with submissions. He will be, you know, mixing in takedowns of his own. And he is a threat wherever the fight goes. And I think the same goes with Giga Chikadze too. Again, he's been putting in work. So you can't just sit here and discredit a guy like Giga or Omar and say, oh, all they got is kickboxing. Like these guys are well-rounded at this point too. And they've been trying to evolve their game every step of the way. So this is my fight to watch, man. You got to put some respect on both guys' names. And honestly, I can't wait to see what happens Saturday night, Dan Tom.
Same here.
So last but not least, I really wanted to talk about this fight because I'm very intrigued by this matchup. We got Youssef Zalal taking on Ilia Topuria. Now, Youssef Zalal, he's quietly gone 3-0 in the UFC. And interestingly enough, he was actually coming off a 2-fight skid when he entered the UFC. But now he's like everyone's top prospect. And I think the kid's great. He's got some serious fight IQ. I mean, he doesn't take much damage. He's got good calf kicks, nice entries to his takedowns, and he's very, very smart. So I like him a lot. It's just that with this kid, Ilia Topuria, Man, I was really impressed when I watched the tape. I was like, okay, like I get why the UFC signed this guy. He's a takedown machine. You know, he's from Georgia, not Georgia where I'm from, Georgia where Merab Dwalishvili's from. So it's not a surprise that he's a takedown machine. And like this guy is relentless. He's got the heart of a champion. The reason I know that, Dan Tom, is because in his last fight, you know, this kid's only 5'7". He fought a 6'1" opponent. He got dropped with a head kick. Now, right then and there, you got the opportunity, cover up, you know, take a couple follow-ups, let the ref intervene, go home. Hey, it's only your first L. No big deal. You'll be back better. You got caught by a 6'1" guy with a head kick. But that's not what Ilia Topuria did, man. He gets back up. He's relentless with the takedown attempts. And he gassed this guy out to the point where it was Ilia who landed the fight-ending blow and knocked this guy out with one punch. And that's a step in the right direction because you watch some of his earlier fights, and he's always had the spirit, but the striking technique wasn't quite up to par. The striking is starting to catch up. The kid's always had the wrestling, though, and he is relentless with those takedowns. Now, the thing is, he hasn't ever seen a third round before, but, like, I don't really have, like, much evidence to prove he can't, fare off well in a third round. You know what I mean? It doesn't seem to me like he's barely hanging on by a thread at the end of round 2 or anything like that. To me, it just seems like these guys can't hang with him. Let's see how he performs at the UFC level. So I'm going to say this. I understand why Yusuf Zalal is favored. You know, the UFC experience, he's on a 3-fight win streak. He's been coming out here, putting on some great performances. Can't take that away from him. I like the kid a lot. It's just that if you truly examine the 3 opponents he's fought, and this is not to discredit his opponents or his wins, this is just to be 100% factual. Austin Lingo is known for that one-punch knockout. He's not known for being a wrestling machine. Jordan Griffin is known for getting dominated and then pulling off, you know, a sub somewhere along the way. He's kind of opportunistic. He's not known, you know, for being a wrestling machine. Peter Barrett is just known for being a tough Boston brawler, kind of like Kyle Bochniak. He's not known for being a wrestling machine. So honestly, Dan Tom, and factually, Dan Tom, the last guys he has fought that were wrestling machines, he lost to both of them on the LFA scene. So this is the first time that he's fought that kind of opponent since his last 2 losses. So on one hand, you can say that, hey, he's adjusted his game to where he can come out here and finally handle that kind of opponent. But on the other hand, you can be like, hey, he's had some very favorable matchups, and now he's getting back to that very challenging stylistic fight where this could bring back those old problems we saw in the regional scene. So that's why I love this fight so much, Dan Tom.
Me too. I agree with the wrestling because I don't think the submission is too much of a threat. He likes the guillotines as well as Bravos and rear naked chokes. And, you know, we know that Jordan Griffin, I believe his favorite sub is the guillotine. He was able to escape those. But the wrestling is, that's where it could be problematic. Now, I'm checking on his social media as we're talking to make sure he's over there at Factory X, which check he looks to be in good shape, which you see. But something we've been talking about, these Factory X fighters, maybe it's because of the location from the Colorado Springs wrestling training facility or whatnot. I'm not sure how far that is, but you see a lot of those guys coming through there and a lot of the fighters posting about, you know, getting that work in. Plus, just the better wrestlers they've been recruiting, like lighterweight guys like Alex Perez, so on and so forth. So I like that as far as a sign to see, as far as now we get to see, okay, how are you going to do against the wrestling threat, Zalal? But also, you know, I still lean towards Zalal because of that experience, you know. I can't remember if it was not that TJ Downtown Brown kid, or if that is even is his name. Forgive me, but there was a kid where I don't know if he has a similar backstory as this guy Ilya, where Ilya, at least according to him, he's one of those kids where, like the Contender Series kid, where they started at 4 years old because their fathers indoctrinated him into jiu-jitsu, whereas they are now Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belts. But similar to that kid who had some good wrestling to go with his jiu-jitsu, I think what we saw is we saw him kind of gas and fade out. Now, I got to go back and watch Ilya's fights more closely. From what you're saying, he doesn't necessarily show signs of that, Dan. And I respect your eyes and opinion on that. So that could be a good sign here. But you got to know that he's got that cardio, I think, to be confident. I don't blame anybody taking a shot on the dog here. But like, I think to be confident against what is more of a point scoring fighter. Now, I like that in Ilya's bio, when he's talking about Zalal, he refers to him as a point scoring fighter. So at least tells me that he knows what he's in for. At least you would hope. So let's see how he does. So I think it's going to be a really big test for both. I'll go with the more experienced guy, but man, you bring up such a good point, Dan, with that stylistic flag as far as what to look out for. If is this guy, is this guy a submission or bust, or is the wrestling, like you said, going to be the real key here? So I'll go ahead and lean towards Zalal, but I got to go back and look through Ilya's fights a little more carefully.
Yeah, look, Zalal should be favored just because of the UFC experience, and he's definitely the best guy that Ilya has ever fought. But man, stylistically, this might be a tough fight for Zalal because Ilya doesn't really give you that space to get off on that kind of pretty point fighting style that Zalal brings to the table. Like, I'm going to be shocked if Ilya is just standing at range, getting calf kicked. Like, I feel like Ilya is going to be pinning him up against the fence. Both guys are going to get tired. And at that point, it's going to become a grind. It's going to become a dogfight. I feel like this is going to be the first quote unquote real fight that Yusuf Zalal's had inside the octagon. Again, that's not to discredit any of his opponents. It's just that Ilya brings something different to the table than any of these other guys have. Now, on the other hand, you could sit here and bring up the Merab example, be like, hey, well, Merab had to pay his dues too. Merab lost his first UFC fights too, and then he went on to become the machine we all know and love, right? So, man, maybe there's some truth to that. But man, I feel like this could be a spot where, like, if Ilya comes out here and is just relentless with his takedowns, this could be the last time we ever see him at plus 160 in the UFC. So I don't know. Because again, I really respect Zalal and I like point fighters. I like guys that just get the job done by any means necessary. So Zalal's got my complete respect. It's just that I don't think that Ilya is going to give him the space to be able to get off on that kind of game plan. And I don't think Ilya is sub or bust. Like, when he hasn't gotten the sub in the first round, he's still been relentless enough to take the guys down. So he seems pretty damn tough to me, man. So I don't know. And when I don't know, I usually roll with the dog. So I'm going to roll with the dog. I'm going to go with Ilya to get a huge upset in his UFC debut. I just think that he'll slightly edge it out with his wrestling. But we'll see what happens Saturday night, Dan Tom.
Yeah, we'll see indeed, my friend.
Well, for everybody listening, thank you guys so much for checking out the Line Movement MMA betting show. Make sure y'all follow Dan Tom at Dan Tom. Make sure y'all follow me. And now, real quick, am I fucking up? Is it Dan Tom MMA or is it just Dan Tom?
At Dan Tom MMA.
Okay, I knew it. I caught myself there. Make sure y'all follow my man at Dan Tom MMA. Make sure you'll follow me at Best Fight Picks. Make sure y'all follow Line Movement at line_movement. Go to linemovement.com. Check out blitzbet.eu. All our Canadian listeners, we truly appreciate it. And also, like I said before, give us a like, give us a subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you get notified every single time we drop a video. And also Apple Podcast, iTunes, hook up that 5-star review. We truly appreciate it. Also want to give a quick shout out to our producer Jordan. Thank you very much, Jordan. To everybody behind the scenes, Nick, Brian, Joe, Dan, James Lynch, everybody else at Line Movement. Truly appreciate everybody for their hard work and their support. And most importantly, the fans. Thank you very much, fans. We truly appreciate it. We'll be back next week because finally, Dan Tom, you ready? Finally, Brian Ortega versus the Korean Zombie. It's allegedly going to happen next Saturday. So we're going to be here to talk about that fight. So everybody stay safe, enjoy the fights, and we will speak soon. Hey, Line Movement fans, if you like what you saw, make sure you click on any of the videos below and give Line Movement a subscribe today.